The movie opens in the mountains of Romsdale in Norway, where Tobias took his daughter Norah to see the troll peaks. He explained that, according to a fairy tale, 13 trolls had gathered there for a wedding. They had become so inebriated that they lost track of time and turned into mountains. Norah, however, told him she thought she was too old for fairy tales, which hurt Tobias to hear. He reminded her that one had to believe in something in order to see it. 20 years later, Norah was an archaeologist on a digging expedition with her team on the Atlantic coast of northwestern Norway. Most of her colleagues were ready to give up after 6 months of finding nothing, and their funding was running low. However, Norah's persistence paid off, and she found a dinosaur skull. The team celebrated her discovery. Meanwhile, in the Dovre Mountains, a construction group was building a new railway by digging through the mountains. Activists who were against the destruction of nature were protesting, but their presence was ignored. When the explosives were activated to start the tunnel, something deep inside the mountains growled. This caused a collapse, and some of the workers couldn't escape in time. The Norwegian armed forces immediately detected the incident and the seismic activity it caused. They sent a reconnaissance aircraft to investigate. Sigrid, who was managing the cameras on the aircraft, quickly assembled a series of visuals and showed them to her superiors. They decided the incident was serious enough to alert Prime Minister Berit. On her way to the base, Berit was informed of the damage caused by unknown forces. She was shown images that her advisor, Andreas, thought looked like footprints. Berit found the idea amusing and unrealistic, but she gave Andreas 2 tasks: to keep the press from getting the information and to find scientific experts who could help them. Moments later, a helicopter picked up Norah in the middle of her celebration, asking her to come with them for a matter of national security. Andreas welcomed Norah to the base and took her to a secret meeting where Berit, top military leaders, and other scientists were discussing possible reasons for the mountain incident. When Norah introduced herself as a paleontologist, she was not taken seriously. They argued that dinosaurs were extinct and, therefore, couldn't have been the cause. The team still considered the possibility of a military attack from another country, but reports seemed to favor a geological cause. Pictures appeared on a screen showing a crater and indentations on the landscape. The other scientists suggested theories like sinkholes or subterranean gas pockets. Norah interrupted them, pointing out that the craters were clearly footprints. Once again, she was dismissed, as the idea of footprints would imply monsters, which they considered a stupid idea. Sigrid interrupted the meeting again, explaining that she had hacked into an activist's phone and found live footage of the incident. The destruction was disturbing to watch, but before anyone could go back to their gas theories, Norah made Sigrid play the video again, this time in slow motion. A roaring animal-like sound was clearly audible, and a huge, mysterious humanoid shape could be seen in the shadows among the falling rocks. Meanwhile, in Lesja, an old married couple wondered what was wrong with their dog, which would not stop barking. Suddenly, their entire house began to shake. The couple ran to their basement to hide before everything started to crumble and the power went out. Once the shaking stopped, they emerged to find their house completely destroyed, though their dog was okay. Back at the base, the leaders still refused to believe the footprints were left by a giant creature. Norah pointed out that they needed to take action against whatever it was instead of arguing for hours. Berit was impressed by Norah's attitude and made her the official scientific advisor. She was then asked to go with Andreas to Lesja to investigate the latest incident. On the helicopter, Andreas asked Norah about her path to becoming a paleontologist. Norah explained that her childhood love for nature and fairy tales evolved into a desire to search for real monsters underground. She revealed that her mother had passed away when she was 10 and that her father, a professor of origin mythologies and folklore, had gradually lost his ability to distinguish between reality and fiction. This was why she had not seen Tobias in years. Andreas confessed he wanted to be a writer and was excited by the possibility of supernatural causes for the recent events. However, Norah cut him off when they arrived at the site, which was a scene of significant destruction. Captain Christopher greeted them and showed them the tracks that started across the river, wound through the valley, and then abruptly stopped in the mountains 2 miles south. Soldiers had swept the area but found no other clues. Norah questioned the old couple who lived there, but they hadn't seen much because a giant moving figure had been blocking the sun. They did, however, recall a loud, sad, howling sound. Examining the damage more closely, Norah noticed a strange and potent smell she decided to call hypernature. Using a UV light, she searched for biological traces, but found nothing but earth and stones. Norah then asked to be taken to where the tracks stopped. A thermal scanner showed no signs of life, only mountains. Since the creature was too big to hide or simply vanish, Norah theorized it might be capable of camouflage. Despite her growing theories, she was still unsure, so she took Christopher and Andreas to see Tobias. When Tobias saw strangers on his property, especially an armed soldier, he came out with a firearm. Norah helped him realize who she was, and he let them inside, although he said he needed to put on some pants first. Tobias's house was filled with research papers and clippings that showed his obsession with a mythical creature he called a troll. Norah stopped him from launching into his theories, asking him to focus on the footage she had brought. She explained that she thought his old work might contain clues and that no one knew these mountains better than him. However, Tobias saw the footage as proof that his troll theory was real. When Norah pointed out that scientists would have found troll DNA if they actually existed, Tobias reminded her that the Christianization of Norway had eliminated all mythical creatures. He also revealed that when he was about to share his findings, he was sent to a mental institution. He believed the people in charge had always known the truth and that fairy tales were written to make trolls seem evil and stupid when they were actually quite intelligent. Norah could not believe what she was hearing, but Tobias was too excited to be stopped. He joined the team and went with them to the location where the tracks had ended. Tobias immediately noticed that the topography of the area was wrong and did not match the maps. He also remarked that this felt like a new adventure with his daughter, but Norah was quick to say she didn't want this to be a reconciliation. Suddenly, the smell of hypernature filled their noses, and the sky darkened as the mountain behind them opened an eye. Both Norah and Tobias had been correct. The creature was a troll, and its ability to camouflage itself explained why the topography was wrong. The troll stood up, revealed its immense size, and roared at them. The team ran back to the helicopter to escape. They still managed to get the troll on camera, and when the base received the transmission, they could no longer deny the truth. Christopher took the group to his military camp so they could call the base and inform them of what they had learned. Norah continued to use the words unknown creature to avoid sounding crazy, but Tobias interrupted her, declaring that it was a troll that had been bothered by the mountain construction, which he considered a mockery of nature. The leaders considered him crazy and kicked him out. When Norah asked for more time, she was also ignored, as the military was more concerned with national safety and began preparing a military operation. Afterward, Norah was furious with her father for ruining everything and wanted to leave. Tobias, however, persuaded her to stay, explaining that this was not a simple fairy tale. He said the creature would not be deterred by weapons or sunlight. He believed the troll was scared and alone, and that weapons would only make it angrier. He also reminded her that nature always pushes back. Norah agreed with him and decided to stay, and they were then tasked with convincing Christopher to take them along. At first, Christopher refused, but after Norah begged him, he agreed to hide them in his helicopter, provided they followed his orders. By the time the military operation arrived in Haidal, night had fallen. While they waited for the troll to appear, Tobias and Norah remembered the fairy tales they had once shared during their adventures, and they finally reconciled. Moments later, the troll showed up, but when it got close, it stopped moving. Tobias was certain the creature knew they were there. The soldiers ignored Tobias's warnings and opened fire, but their bullets and explosions did nothing. As Tobias had predicted, the troll retaliated. Everyone began running as the creature destroyed everything in its path, including the cameras transmitting the operation to the main base. The team hid behind a tree with a wounded soldier. Just as they were about to move, the troll reached down and grabbed the soldier to eat him. Tobias explained that the creature had likely smelled the blood. Norah, Andreas, and Christopher wanted to run, but Tobias decided to try a different approach. He walked toward the troll and spoke to it gently. To everyone's shock, the troll stopped moving and answered his peaceful words with gentle groans. Unfortunately, some of the soldiers did not get the memo. A truck opened fire on the troll again, and as the creature turned to attack, it accidentally hit Tobias. As the troll walked away, Norah rushed to her father's side. Before he died, Tobias mumbled the words, "the palace, the king, home," and asked Norah to remember to believe. Back at the base, Norah buried herself in Tobias's research to cope with her pain and search for a solution. Andreas and Christopher came to check on her, informing her that they had lost sight of the troll, but that the army was preparing an airstrike. Norah was convinced the attack would fail just like the last one, so they had to think outside the box. They had two clues. Fairy tales said trolls disliked sunlight, but this one had been seen during the day, and Tobias had mentioned the Christianization of Norway destroying the trolls. This second clue gave Norah an idea. They contacted Barrett and the others, explaining that stories claimed trolls used to throw boulders at churches when they heard the bells. Therefore, they needed to use bells. The leaders thought the idea was ridiculous, but Christopher intervened, reminding them that nothing else had worked. Barrett reluctantly gave them permission to proceed. The troll reappeared moments later, heading toward the Hunderfossen family park and causing mass panic. As everyone fled, a little girl stood watching the creature. Christopher and Norah arrived in a helicopter, guiding a hovercraft carrying giant bells. They surrounded the troll and began ringing the bells. Norah was right. The sound hurt the troll. However, the troll defended itself, hitting the helicopters and causing them to crash. As one helicopter was about to fall on the little girl, the troll surprisingly grabbed it to save her before walking away. Because the incident happened in such a public place, the entire world was now aware of the troll. Newscasts from every country covered the event, and phone-recorded clips went viral on social media. The troll was now making its way to the capital city. Upon returning to the base, a furious Barrett ignored Norah's suggestion that they try again with the bells from a different angle. Instead, she kicked Norah out. On her way out, Norah ran into Christopher, who confessed he thought Barrett was making a mistake and offered his support if Norah ever needed anything. In the conference room, military leaders told Barrett about some dangerous missiles that had not been officially approved. Barrett was shocked, and when Andreas pointed out that such weapons should not even be considered, he was also kicked out. Realizing he would not be taken seriously, Andreas decided to quit and joined Norah. He told her to prepare because the city was being evacuated. Moments later, Barrett appeared on television, officially announcing a state of emergency and asking citizens to cooperate with soldiers as they prepared for the next operation and facilitated the evacuation. Norah and Andreas, stuck in traffic, were in the same car. Norah used this time to look at Tobias's research, which repeatedly mentioned Sinding and a gatekeeper. Andreas suggested this could be Rickard Sinding, the Lord Chamberlain at the Royal Palace. Norah suddenly remembered Tobias's final words, King Palace Home, and concluded they had to go to the Royal Palace. Andreas drove them there, and they were stopped by guards at the gate. However, Sinding immediately came to let them in, explaining that he had been expecting Tobias or someone related to him to show up sooner or later. Sinding respected Tobias, even though Tobias hated him, and Tobias's stubbornness had led him to be one of the few people to discover the secret beneath the palace. Once upon a time, it was considered good luck to build a palace on top of another king's home. It turned out this particular palace was built where the Troll King used to live. Sinding took Norah and Andreas to a tunnel filled with troll bones. He explained that during the Christianization of Norway, everything that went against their faith was killed. They had ambushed the royal troll family, sparing only one baby to lure the king into the mountain. There, they had locked the king in a cavern and left it for dead. 12 years prior, Tobias had discovered all this, and Sinding had him institutionalized to protect the secret. He felt bad about it, but still considered it the right thing to do, which infuriated Norah. She realized there was no time for arguments. Tobias was right. The Troll King was coming home to the palace, and they needed to stop it. While looking at the bones, Norah noticed her UV light was damaging them, confirming that the stories about trolls and sunlight were true. She realized that while they had seen the troll during the day, it had never been under direct sunlight due to the clouds and mountains. Andreas pointed out they could not control the sun, but Norah had a plan and called Christopher for help. He would set a special trap while Norah and Andreas lured the troll to it. Meanwhile, the troll had arrived in the city. The military attacks failed to harm it, so Barrett approved the use of the missiles. Sigrid noticed the leaders were preparing to launch the missiles and called Andreas to warn him, telling them they needed to buy time. Andreas asked Sigrid to hack into the army's system to stop the launch. At the same time, Christopher rang the alarm system throughout the city, bringing his soldiers to his location to help with the trap. Sinding also helped, asking the guards to place one of the troll skulls on the biggest truck they had. Norah and Andreas would then use it to lure the troll away from the palace. It took a few tries, but Sigrid successfully hacked into the system and immediately stopped the missile launch, giving Norah and Andreas the time they needed. When the troll got closer, they took off and revealed the skull on the back of the truck. This angered the troll, which roared and chased them as planned. Norah called Christopher to tell him they were on their way, and he gave a motivational speech to his soldiers to keep them brave when the monster appeared. As Norah and Andreas drove wildly through the streets of Oslo, they finally reached the highway, but they accidentally lost the skull they were using as a lure. The troll stopped to pick it up, letting out a groan of grief for its lost children. It then noticed its reflection on a building and tried to touch the glass. The glass shattered, and the sudden noise startled the troll, causing it to drop and break the skull into 1,000,000 pieces. The troll roared in pain and sadness, and Norah could feel its sorrow over being the last of its kind. The creature then came after them for revenge. Norah resumed their plan, driving away and doing her best to dodge the destruction the troll was causing. Back at the base, Sigrid's hacking was discovered, and her computer was taken away to restart the system. Seconds later, Norah and Andreas arrived at the trap site, where they jumped out of the truck and continued to lure the troll toward the center as it stepped on their vehicle. The troll then tried to step on Norah, but at that moment the soldiers activated dozens of UV lights that surrounded the creature and began to burn it. A plane carrying missiles was also approaching, but the pilot hesitated when he saw civilians on the ground. An argument broke out at the base about whether to abort the mission. In a fit of anger, Sigrid punched a superior who didn't seem to care about the civilians, and the operation was aborted. On their screen, Barrett and the others at the base watched as the troll slowly died. Christopher's soldiers began to celebrate their victory. However, Norah couldn't bear to see the creature suffer. She turned off the power to save it. She then stopped the soldiers from shooting and approached the troll the same way her father had, gently asking it to return to the safety of the mountains. The troll stared at her, considering her words, but before it could react, the sun rose and burned the troll until only a pile of rubble remained. As everyone celebrated, Andreas joked about what to name the new monument or hill, and Norah decided it would be called the Tobias Boulder. When Barrett arrived, she thanked Norah for her work. Andreas reminded the Prime Minister that he had quit and announced that he would be a writer. As he walked away with Norah, he wondered if there might be more creatures hidden in Dover. Deep in the mountains, under a pile of rocks, something began to move. So, what did you think of the movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you in the next video.